On April 12, 1955, a Lockheed test pilot named Tony Levier climbed into an experimental aircraft and took off from a dry lake bed in the middle of the Nevada desert. The plane was unlike anything that had ever flown. It could reach 70,000 feet. Soviet radar couldn't touch it, and the base he took off from, a remote strip of tarmac surrounded by miles of nothing, did not officially exist. For decades, the United States government would insist, with a straight face, that this place was not real. But here's the strange part. That base, the one that didn't exist, would go on to become the most famous secret military installation in human history. And the story of what actually happened there, not the aliens, not the flying saucers, not the conspiracy theories, is stranger than any of them. Imagine driving north from Las Vegas. The neon fades behind you. The billboards disappear. Within an hour, you are surrounded by nothing. Sagebrush, salt flats, the occasional Joshua tree twisted against the sky. The highway stretches forward like a scar across the desert floor. And then, if you keep going, you hit a sign. It doesn't say Area 51. It doesn't say secret base. It just tells you in plain language that you are not welcome here, that beyond this point, the United States government is not obligated to explain itself to you. Beyond that sign lies roughly 575 square miles of restricted airspace and desert terrain, an area larger than the city of Los Angeles. At the center, a dry lake bed called Groom Lake. And on that lake bed, one of the most consequential pieces of real estate in the history of aviation. But before we get to what's inside, before the aliens, before the conspiracy theories, before the internet crashed the government's website with Storm Area 51 memes, we need to understand something. Area 51 was not built to hide aliens. It was built to hide airplanes. And the story of how it came to exist begins with a problem. The problem was this. In the early 1950s, the United States had no idea what the Soviet Union was doing. Think about that. Two global superpowers, enough nuclear weapons to end civilization, and neither side could see over the fence. The year is 1953. President Eisenhower is staring at reconnaissance photos taken by aging aircraft flying at the edge of their operational range, and he is not happy. The photos are blurry. The planes keep getting shot at. And somewhere behind the Iron Curtain, the Soviets are building bombers, missiles, and nuclear weapons at a pace nobody in Washington can confirm. Eisenhower needed something that didn't exist yet. A plane that could fly higher than any interceptor could reach, higher than Soviet radar could track. A plane that could photograph military installations from 70,000 feet and return home without a scratch. The CIA, yes, the Central Intelligence Agency, was put in charge of making this happen. They called it Project Aquatone. The aircraft would be called the U-2, and it would be built in secret by a company called Lockheed at a facility nicknamed the Skunk Works. The Skunk Works was run by a legendary engineer named Clarence Kelly Johnson. Johnson was the kind of man who could look at a problem the entire aviation industry said was impossible and just solve it. He had designed the P-38 Lightning during World War II. He had designed America's first operational jet fighter, the P-80 Shooting Star. And now, he was being asked to build a spy plane that could fly at the edge of space. But building the plane was only half the problem. The other half was, where do you test it? You can't test a top-secret spy plane at Edwards Air Force Base. Too many people, too many eyes. You needed somewhere remote, somewhere flat, somewhere nobody would think to look. Kelly Johnson sent a test pilot named Tony Levier to scout locations across the Nevada desert. Levier flew a small plane over miles and miles of nothing until he spotted it. A dry lake bed, perfectly flat, surrounded by mountains. The nearest town was hours away. The nearest paved road barely existed. Johnson flew over it himself. He landed on the cracked clay surface. He got out of his plane, looked around at the emptiness in every direction, and made his decision. This was the place. The CIA added it to a map of atomic testing sites. They called it Watertown. Later, the designation would change. On Atomic Energy Commission maps, the grid square containing the base was labeled Area 51. The name was bureaucratic, forgettable, deliberately so. And in July of 1955, the first U-2 took off from that dry lake bed and climbed into the sky. The U-2 worked. It worked so well that it changed the entire balance of the Cold War. Throughout the late 1950s, U-2 flights over the Soviet Union photographed airfields, missile sites, submarine pens, intelligence that was previously impossible to obtain. The Soviets knew the planes were up there. Their radar could track them, but their fighters could not reach them. Their missiles could not touch them. But here's the thing nobody talks about when they talk about Area 51. The U-2 program created an unintended consequence, a side effect that nobody predicted. And it's this side effect that, decades later, would fuel every alien conspiracy theory you've ever heard. The U-2 flew at altitudes that commercial airliners could not reach. At 60,000 feet and above, it existed in airspace that, to most people, might as well have been outer space. But commercial airline pilots, flying at 20,000 to 30,000 feet, could see the U-2 above them. And when the sun caught the U-2's silver wings at that altitude, it didn't look like an airplane. It looked like a disk of light, a metallic object moving at impossible speeds, an unidentified flying object. The CIA's own historians later confirmed this. A 1998 internal report, declassified years later, stated that U-2 flights accounted for more than half of all UFO sightings reported in the late 1950s and 1960s. More than half. Think about that. The government was secretly testing spy planes that nobody knew existed. Pilots and citizens were seeing things they could not explain. And when they reported those things, the Air Force, which knew exactly what they were seeing, had to lie. They couldn't say, "Oh, that's our top secret spy plane." They had to say, "We investigated. It was probably a weather balloon. Nothing to see here." And so, without intending to, the United States government trained an entire generation to distrust official explanations about unidentified objects in the sky. They created the conditions for the very conspiracy theories that would later consume them. But the U-2 was just the beginning. By the late 1950s, the Soviet Union had developed surface-to-air missiles that could threaten the U-2. In May of 1960, a U-2 piloted by Francis Gary Powers was shot down over Soviet territory. Powers survived. He was captured. The incident became an international crisis. The CIA needed a new plane, one that could fly even higher, even faster, and ideally, one that Soviet radar could not see at all. What came next was the A-12 Oxcart, a single-seat reconnaissance aircraft that could fly at over 2,200 miles per hour, more than 3 times the speed of sound, at altitudes exceeding 90,000 feet. The skin of the aircraft was built from titanium, much of it secretly sourced from the Soviet Union itself through shell companies because the United States didn't have enough domestic supply. From the A-12 came the SR-71 Blackbird, perhaps the most legendary aircraft ever built. To this day, the SR-71 holds speed and altitude records that have never been broken by any air-breathing manned aircraft. It could cross the continental United States in just over an hour. It could outrun surface-to-air missiles simply by accelerating. And all of it, the testing, the development, the training, happened at Area 51. The base grew. Hangars were built. Runways were extended. Radar testing facilities were constructed. The number of personnel swelled into the thousands. Engineers, pilots, mechanics, security teams, all living under extraordinary secrecy. Workers flew in daily on unmarked aircraft from Las Vegas. They called it the Ranch, or simply Dreamland. They were forbidden from discussing their work with anyone, including their families. And here is where the story takes a turn. Because for decades, this was the reality of Area 51, a secret aircraft development facility. Extraordinary, yes. World-changing, absolutely. But human. Mundane even, in its own strange way. Engineers commuted to work in the desert. They ate lunch. They went home. They built machines that pushed the limits of physics. Then, in 1989, a man walked into a television studio and changed everything. His name was Robert Scott Lazar, Bob Lazar to the world. He claimed he was a physicist who had worked at a facility called S4 near Area 51, reverse engineering alien spacecraft. He claimed the government had 9 flying saucers. He claimed the technology used an element that did not exist on the periodic table, element 115, to generate a gravity-distorting field that allowed the craft to maneuver in ways that defied known physics. The interview, conducted by investigative reporter George Knapp of KLAS-TV in Las Vegas, aired in November 1989. It was an earthquake. Almost overnight, Area 51 transformed from a classified military installation that few Americans had heard of into the most famous secret base on Earth. The alien narrative was compelling. It was visual. It was proof, in the minds of millions, that the government was lying about something far bigger than spy planes. But here's the strange part. And for a channel dedicated to mysteries, to hidden truths, to the things we're not supposed to know, this is where we have to be honest. Bob Lazar's story has problems, significant ones. He claimed to have degrees from MIT and Caltech, degrees that neither institution has any record of. He claimed to have worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory as a physicist. Employment records suggest he worked for a contractor, not as a scientist. The element 115 he described did not exist in 1989. It would not be synthesized in a laboratory until 2003, and the synthetic version bore no resemblance to what Lazar described. None of this proves he was lying, but it also doesn't prove he was telling the truth. And here is what I find most interesting. The United States government, which has spent decades refusing to acknowledge Area 51 at all, has never, not once, publicly debunked Bob Lazar's specific claims. They have never said he was never there. They have never said there are no alien spacecraft. They have remained, as they always have, silent. That silence is fuel. It allows believers to say, if it wasn't true, they'd deny it. And it allows skeptics to say, they don't bother denying it because it's not worth their time. Both sides use the same silence to prove opposite points. And the truth, the actual, documented, declassified truth, sits somewhere in between. More interesting than either extreme. In 2013, something remarkable happened. For the first time in history, the CIA officially acknowledged the existence of Area 51. The acknowledgement came buried in a declassified history of the U-2 program, a document requested under the Freedom of Information Act by an archival researcher at George Washington University. The document described, in dry, bureaucratic language, the selection of Groom Lake as a test site. It included maps. It included photographs. It confirmed what aviation historians had known for decades, that Area 51 was a testing facility for experimental aircraft. But the document also confirmed something else, something subtle. It confirmed that the secrecy around Area 51 had been so extreme, so sustained, and so effective that even the acknowledgement of the base's existence 60 years after it was built became international news. And this, I think, is the real story of Area 51. The real story is not about aliens. It is about the human capacity for secrecy, the extraordinary lengths a government will go to in order to protect technological advantage, the way a classified program over decades can generate a mythology so powerful that the mythology itself becomes a kind of truth, a truth that millions of people believe more firmly than any government document could disprove. Area 51 has tested the U-2, the A-12, the SR-71, the F-117. Nighthawk stealth fighter, the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, and aircraft we still don't know about. Technologies that are probably still classified, still hidden, still years or decades away from public acknowledgement. And every time someone saw something in the sky they couldn't explain, the government had a choice. Explain the secret, or let the mystery grow. They chose the mystery, every single time. Here's what I keep coming back to. Area 51 sits on a dry lake bed in the middle of one of the emptiest places in America. It has no official sign. It appears on no tourist maps. The airspace above it is restricted up to infinity, not a number, infinity. The government's legal claim over that airspace extends upward without limit. And yet, millions of people have made the drive. They've stood at the gate. They've looked through the fence at the empty desert beyond. They know they're not going to see anything. They know there are no answers waiting for them at the perimeter of a restricted military facility. But they go anyway, because Area 51 is not really about what's behind the fence. It never was. It's about what's behind the silence. It's about the gap between what we're told and what we know must be true. It's about the very human need, the need that built this channel, the need that brought you here, to ask questions that may not have answers. The greatest mystery of Area 51 may not be what the government is hiding inside the hangars. It's how little we actually need to know, how little evidence, how little proof, to build an entire mythology from a blank spot on the map. The desert does not give up its secrets easily, and perhaps that's the point. Perhaps the secret of Area 51 is that there is no single secret, just decades of classified research, layers of compartmentalized programs, and a culture of secrecy so deeply embedded that even the people who work there don't know what the person in the next hangar is doing. Or perhaps, and this is the thought that keeps the mystery alive, perhaps there is something else. Something that all the declassified documents in the world cannot explain. Something that the silence is still protecting. The desert keeps its secrets. The fence stands. The signs still warn. And somewhere on a dry lake bed in Nevada, behind miles of empty road and decades of classified history, the real story of Area 51 continues to unfold, whether we ever hear it or not.